Hello everyone. Now as you know, Michael Jordan fans are the worst sports fans of all time, and one of the many reasons why is because these people really like the intangibles. So let me tell you how this one goes. They will say things like, well, hey, just because one player has better statistics, it doesn't matter because he doesn't have better intangibles, or intangibles are more important than statistics. Or they will just tell you that Michael Jordan had better intangibles than whoever they are comparing Michael Jordan to. Or they will just tell you things like Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time when it comes to intangibles. It just depends on the Michael Jordan fan. Now I am going to explain to you why all this is ridiculous. Here are the reasons why in no particular order. First, when they rank players because of things like this, they are disrespecting lots of players. Next, when they rank players because of things like this, they are dismissing lots of players. Next, when they claim to respect the game and they disrespect the NBA players, they are contradicting themselves. Next, when they claim to love the game and then they dismiss the NBA players, they are contradicting themselves. Next, Michael Jordan fans have a history of always trying to find a way to make Michael Jordan the number one NBA player of all time. So that right there shows you that they're not reliable. Next, understand why they're doing all these things when it comes to intangibles. They are just trying to find a way to tear down some NBA players who they think are a threat to Michael Jordan and elevate Michael Jordan. Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that lots of the players that Michael Jordan played with don't agree with them? Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that lots of the players that Michael Jordan played against don't agree with them? Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that lots of the owners, general managers, coaches, and other NBA people that Michael Jordan played for don't agree with them? Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that lots of NBA Hall of Famers, lots of NBA legends, lots of NBA scouts, and lots of NBA experts don't agree with them? Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that Michael Jordan doesn't agree with them? Next, since lots of these people don't agree with them, why do Michael Jordan fans sometimes reference one or more of these people for one or more topics? Next, how do Michael Jordan fans explain that usually the only people who think this are Michael Jordan fans? Next, if this was the other way around and they were an NBA Hall of Famer or some other NBA person and they found out that there was a younger NBA fan who wasn't there when they played, who doesn't have that much tape of them, who isn't an expert on the past NBA and so on, and they found out that this younger NBA fan said this thing, they wouldn't agree with that fan. Next, if some non-Michael Jordan fan said this thing and it went against Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan fans wouldn't agree with that non-Michael Jordan fan. Next, Michael Jordan fans have a contradiction. They always ask people who disagree with them if they were there when Michael Jordan played, if they went to his games, if they saw his games live on TV, and so on. And yet, they don't ask themselves these same type of questions when it comes to lots of other NBA Hall of Famers. If they did, they would know that it would go against them, and they wouldn't come to this kind of conclusion. Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't say this kind of thing for some other NBA players? Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't say this kind of thing for some other players who played other sports? Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't say this kind of thing for some other people and some other things when it comes to other things outside of sports? Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't say this when it comes to who they rank as the number 2 NBA player of all time, and the number 3 NBA player of all time, and the number 4 NBA player of all time, and so on? Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't say this when it comes to who they rank as the number 1 player, and the number 2 player, and the number 3 player, and so on when it comes to other sports? Next, how come Michael Jordan fans don't say this when it comes to the number 1 person, or the number 1 thing, or the number 2 person, or the number 2 thing, or the number 3 person, or the number 3 thing, and so on when it comes to other things outside of sports? Next, Michael Jordan fans are putting all the other players in a lose-lose situation. If they have good intangibles, they'll dismiss it. If they don't have good intangibles, they'll hold it against them. Next, a player can dominate this game, be above average, be average, or anything else, whether they have good intangibles or not. Next, I want you to think about something logical. Is it logical for them to think this thing about intangibles? Next, Michael Jordan fans have a contradiction contradiction. They always tell people that the most important thing is winning, that the ring is the most important thing, that statistics don't matter as much as winning, and everything else doesn't matter as much as winning. And yet they are going by intangibles. That is a contradiction. Next, Michael Jordan fans have a contradiction. They don't really care about intangibles. When it comes to intangibles, they really only care about four things. When Michael Jordan has good intangibles, ignoring when Michael Jordan does not have good intangibles, and when another star is a threat to Michael Jordan, they want to ignore when that star has good intangibles, and they want to focus on when that star does not have good intangibles. Next, it's harder to get better at things that can be measured with statistics than it is to get better with things known as the intangibles. So that right there shows you that the guy who is better with things that can be measured with statistics is better than the guy who is known to have good intangibles. Next, use some common sense. Imagine a player was really good. He could score, rebound, get assists, and there are more examples, but you get the point. And so he had really good statistics. And another player had good intangibles, like he could set screens, he was good at making inbound passes, he knew how to box out, and things like that. Which player would you go with? The first one. That is an example of why you should not lower statistics and elevate intangibles. Next, if they go by all of the intangibles, how do they know how to figure out how good a player is at each intangible? Next, if they go by some of the intangibles, how do they know which ones to go by? Next, if they go by some of the intangibles, why don't they go by all of the intangibles? Next, when it comes to which intangible they go by, do they consider all of those intangibles to be on the same level? If so, when they start to compare Michael Jordan to someone, how do they know which player was better? Next, if they don't consider all the intangibles that they go by to be on the same level, then how do they know the value of each intangible? Next, if they were to try to figure out the value of each intangible and then they add it together and then they compare Michael Jordan to someone else, do they just try to figure out who had more intangibles? Or what if he was better in one area but not as good in more than one other area? Or what if he was better for a few years but the other player was a little bit better for a lot more years? Next, when they go by intangibles, they don't usually take into consideration other factors. For example, they don't consider how good a team is or what the rules are or how many luxuries a player might have, and there are more examples, but you get the point. Next, Michael Jordan fans have a contradiction. Because they don't go by other factors, they are not putting things in context, and these are the same people who always tell you that when it comes to the NBA, you should put things in context. That is a contradiction. Next, whatever they figure out when it comes to intangibles, how do they then mix it with statistics? And how do they mix it with awards? And how do they mix it with rings? And how do they mix it with anything else that they go by when they try to rank players? Next, it makes no sense if they ignore statistics or if they put statistics lower than intangibles. Statistics show you what a player did. They are facts. You can't use all of the intangibles to show what a player did. They are not facts. Next, Michael Jordan fans have a contradiction. They will not go by statistics, or they will put statistics lower than intangibles, and they will say it's because statistics are not reliable. Well, that is not true. But if they really believe that, then intangibles are not reliable. That is a contradiction. Next, Michael Jordan fans have a contradiction. They will tell you that statistics are reliable, but you can't always rely on statistics 100% of the time to figure out a player. That is true. Not all statistics are 100% reliable, but you can't always rely on intangibles 100% to figure things out with a player. That is a contradiction. Next, Michael Jordan fans love to tell you that you can't rely on statistics 100% of the time to figure things out with a player, and that is true, but they are more reliable than intangibles. The intangibles are less reliable than the statistics. Next, use some common sense. What do players do in a game? They score, they rebound, they pass, and there are more examples, but you get the point. So when you have the statistics to show you all these things, you don't need to go by the intangibles. Don't get me wrong, if you can figure out intangibles, then you can go over those things if you like, but you do not need to. If you have lots of examples of how good a player is when it comes to his statistics, then you don't have to go over how good a player is when it comes to his intangibles. If a team could get a player that had really good statistics, do you think they would say, well, don't get him because his intangibles are a little questionable? Or hey, don't get him because we do not know what his intangibles are. I mean, imagine if they had two good players in front of them. One player had really good statistics and his intangibles were a little bit questionable, and another player didn't have that good statistics, but he had really good intangibles. Which player do you think they would pick? The first player. There has never been an example where they did not pick the first guy guy and they picked the second guy. Next, there is no factual way to know for sure what counts as an NBA intangible. Next, there is no factual way to measure all of the things that count as NBA intangibles. Next, there is no fact to prove that the guy who has good statistics is not as good as the guy who has better intangibles. Hey, please subscribe, and if you disagree with me on something, you can go on my program and show me your facts on whatever you disagree on. If you want to go on, let's set it up. Send me an email. The email is right there in the description section. Thank you.